Welcome, everybody, to Edge of the Rabbit Hole here on Connecting the Universe. I'm author and researcher Mike Ricksecker. With me, as always, my co-host is Victoria Mundae. And down in the chat room, Alina, monitoring the chat. Well, we have a fantastic show coming up for you tonight. Our good friend Mark Anthony, the psychic explorer, the psychic lawyer, is with us again this evening. It's been a little while since we've had Mark, but we've had him several times on the show before. Fourth generational psychic medium. You've probably seen him on a bunch of different television shows. What is the holistic magazine you write for again, Mark?
Yeah, Best Holistic Life magazine. I've been writing for that for about 5 years, and it's really cool because when I was invited to be one of the authors, it was an online quarterly publication with 40,000 subscribers. Now it's monthly. We have over 2 million subscribers, and you can get it in hard copy and online. bestholisticlife.com, and it is such an honor to write for that magazine because we go into all different types of topics. It's health, fitness, holistic awareness, and what I really like is I get to write a lot about spirituality and ancient mysteries. So, and which is the perfect show here on Edge of the Rabbit Hole to talk about.
Yeah, which we're going to be doing tonight. We're going to be talking about the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle, which, Mark, you live right there.
I do.
So that's in your backyard, like literally.
It literally is. It's right up the street. I live on the barrier island of East Coast Central Florida. And so I've always been, since I was a little kid, immersed in tales of the Bermuda Triangle. Mm-hmm. And then some years back, I was fortunate to serve briefly on two different tall sailing ships, the Phantom and the Polynesia. And they were beautiful tall sailing ships. And they're based out of Antigua and St. Martin. And going into the Bermuda Triangle on a tall sailing ship's like 300 feet tall, these big sails. And, we used to use the diesel engines more than we have to be, admit that. But the crew was largely West Indian. And the West Indians did not like going into the Bermuda Triangle. And there was this one island that we'd always go to. It was uninhabited, and it was right on the edge of the Bermuda Triangle. And just to the north of this island was the extreme, outer edge of the triangle. And Mike and Victoria, every time I was there, out on the horizon, the sky was so dramatic. It was purple, blue, pink, swirling, and it was beautiful. But there was like the way I like to analogize it, it's kind of like in ancient Greek mythology when the sirens, they would sing their beautiful songs to lure the sailors to their death. And that's what it felt like. And the West Indies, like, oh, bad magic, come on, bad magic, come on. They did not. And I'll tell you, they're really smart, because the thing about the West Indian people is they know that there's more to the world than what meets the eye. Yeah. And they're always saying they said there's bad mojo in that. And so the captains of these ships were usually British, and they did their utmost to try not to go too deep into the Bermuda Triangle. So sadly, the Phantom was the flagship of the Windjammer fleet. She was a beautiful ship. She was commissioned by an English lord back in, I think, like 1917. To lay cable across the Atlantic, but she turned into a pleasure vessel, and somehow or other Aristotle Onassis ended up buying it, and he was going to give it to Grace Kelly as a wedding present when she married Prince Rainier. But then when he was snubbed and not invited to the wedding, he reneged on the gift, and eventually the Windjammer fleet bought it. But in 1998, Hurricane Mitch was coming into the Caribbean. Now, this didn't happen to the Bermuda Triangle, but out of respect for the Phantom, they offloaded the passengers in Belize, and which is which is on the Yucatan Peninsula, which connects to Mexico. And the captain wanted to head up the coast to get away from Hurricane Mitch, but then the hurricane changed directions and the
Okay.
Phantom was never heard from again. She went
Oh,
down
wow.
all hands, and I knew some of the people on it.
Oh, that's
31,
sad.
yeah, 31 lives were lost. The only thing they ever found was a ladder,
Oh my
one of the
gosh.
tech ladders floating in the ocean. Yeah.
Oh, that's sad. Well, let's get into a little bit about what the Bermuda Triangle is. And again, sorry for the loss of your friends there on that
Yeah.
ship.
Well, thank you.
But yeah, I mean, this is an area that stretches basically Bermuda, Miami, San Juan, Puerto Rico, that is infamous for all of the really strange phenomena that occurs within this area. You're talking like missing ships,
Yeah.
missing airplanes. We can go back to the beginning there with with Christopher Columbus. He's a fireball come out of the sky, and he had all kinds of crazy compass readings too. And then like all the little what called like candle lights on water.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more about like the history of the Bermuda Triangle and what's been going on here over the centuries?
Well, the day we're doing the show is September 17th. And on September 15th of 1492, Columbus had just entered what would be the Bermuda Triangle. And all of a sudden, they encountered this vast sea of seaweed. Now, it's the Sargasso Sea. And these 15th century sailors were terrified. It was creepy. They thought they were going to get stuck in it. And you don't get stuck in the seaweed. I mean, get caught up in the rudder and all that, but it's not gonna maroon the ship.
Right.
And Columbus thought, well, we must be near land because of seaweed, but it's not. And they thought it was creepy and evil. But now marine biologists, the Sargasso Sea is called the ocean's rainforest, and it's extremely important environment. Well, then, like you brought up, a strange light fell from the sky and hit the water. Now, it was probably a meteorite.
Yeah.
Once again, we had, there you go. It's a good, you have a bunch of 15th century sailors. This is basically the end of the medieval era. And when they saw something like this was an evil omen. And Columbus was hearing rumblings of mutiny. His flagships, the Santa Maria, and he had the Nina and the Pinta. But then, to make matters worse, all of their compasses started going crazy erratic. And that was documented in his log on September 15th of 1492. Now, throughout the entire world, ships sink and disappear all the time.
Sure.
And by proportion, the Bermuda Triangle doesn't have a greater number of ships disappearing, but it's the how they disappear and how they disappear without a trace. Now, what I find interesting is your work with the Alaska Triangle, because there's a lot of things there that disappear without a trace. And that's why when we were talking about doing the show, we got two, you're the authority on the Alaska Triangle, I'm an authority on the Bermuda Triangle. So perhaps we can come up with some new angles on the triangles.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you talk about Alaska, I mean, there are the coast is bizarre because when we think of Alaska, we usually just see it in like a little inset in the corner of the map, that sort of thing. And it's so far up north. But the entire coastline of Alaska, if you add that up, it is greater than if you were to add up the coastline from the west coast and the east coast of the continental 48 states. So it's a huge area. People think of it as, okay, it's a big state, lots of land, mountains, that sort of thing. But there is a lot of water up there too. And in fact, like Minnesota brags about being the land of 10,000 lakes. Yeah, well, there's 3 million lakes in Alaska. So, there's a lot of water up there. So there's a lot of, there've been a lot of shipwrecks, missing ships, ghost ships that have been sighted, but then you have a lot of the missing airplanes as well. And down there in the Bermuda Triangle, you have the most famous one, missing airplanes, Flight 19, that whole squadron going missing during a training run.
Yeah, and the reason that I'm glad you brought that up is the commonality between the Bermuda Triangle and the Alaska Triangle. There's many theories about why ships disappear, and we can go into those, but I want to go right to the cool one that connects the two because let's face it, the Bermuda Triangle is in the tropics in the Caribbean, and the Alaska Triangle obviously is up, the northern latitudes close to the Arctic Circle, or it does also touch the Arctic Circle. But what's the commonality there? It's electromagnetism.
Right.
And Columbus was the first to document that on September 15th of 1492. All of the compasses went crazy. Then in 1918, the USS Cyclops was the largest cargo ship in the world. It was over 500 feet long. Yeah, it weighed over 1 million pounds, and its compasses started going crazy, and then all of a sudden, nothing.
Yeah.
The thing about the Cyclops is that it was the technologically advanced ship of the day because it had radio. All right, back then, radio was still a new thing.
It was in its infancy, yeah.
Yeah, and they could never find the wreckage of it. And President Woodrow Wilson said, "Only God and the sea knows what happened to the great ship." But it gets even better, because there were 2 other Cyclops class ships, same size and design, that disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle in 1941, just prior to the U.S. entry into World War II. Now, maybe they were sunk by a German U-boat, or maybe something else happened. And here's the great anomaly. Why hasn't the wreckage been found at the bottom of the ocean near the last known position of these ships that weigh 1 million pounds? Now, some initial...
Well, and let me ask you this, Mark. Because of those other 2 ships, now they're all, because of the type of ships that they're carrying manganese ore. With all 3 ships, when they went missing, were carrying this manganese ore. And we're talking about electromagnetism, and you're right, that's the primary component of what's going on in these different areas. So with that ore being within the ship, did the electromagnetism of the area interacting with that metallic ore have an effect to make these things, whether it was disappear or whatever the heck happened to these?
I think that's the most plausible explanation. And let me get to Flight 19.
All right.
Flight 19, you brought it up, and you were in the Air Force, okay?
Yeah.
So you're familiar with aviation. Flight 19, there were 5 Avenger fighter bombers that took off from Fort Lauderdale for a routine training mission to go to the Bahamas under the command of Lieutenant Charles Taylor. These were the most technologically sophisticated aircraft of the day. Then they hit torrential rain, and all of a sudden, I'm going to read, because I actually have the last transmission from Lieutenant Taylor. He said, first off, he was suddenly under the impression that they were over the Florida Keys instead of the Bahamas.
Right, which was really unusual.
Really, really unusual. He radioed command that their compasses were malfunctioning. And this is a direct quote from Taylor. "We cannot be sure of any direction. Everything is wrong. Strange. The ocean doesn't look as it should. I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down, and I don't know how to get to Fort Lauderdale." Okay, Fort Lauderdale is literally hundreds of miles from the Keys by air.
Right.
And that's what the Navy couldn't understand. And they radioed him and said, "Use the ZBX emergency transmitter locating system." They got no response but static. Standard operating procedure in the Atlantic is, if something goes wrong for pilots, fly due west, because you're going to go over land. But he didn't do that. And one of his, the other pilots said, "Damn it, if we would just fly west, we'd hit land." Meanwhile, over the Florida Keys, unconnected to Flight 19, another pilot radioed in and said, "My compass is going crazy."
Yeah.
Okay. So then Flight 19 is in distress, and Fort Lauderdale scrambles 2 PBM search planes. Minutes after takeoff, one disappears. There was an explosion cited by a tanker. None of these planes were ever found. No
Right.
wreckage of them at the bottom of the ocean. Now,
yeah, and that's pretty bizarre to me that one of the search and rescue planes also goes missing. I mean, just missing. Yeah,
right. And I believe that they also had problems with their compasses, and a 5-day search. Okay, 5-day search involved 300 ships and aircraft. They searched a 300,000 square mile area, found nothing. The Navy investigation concluded, and you'll love this. Taylor confused the Bahamas for the Florida Keys and thought they were hundreds of miles off course. No wreckage has been found. It is as if they had flown to Mars. End quote. Yeah. This is the right show to say that.
Exactly, yes.
Now, one of the other theories with the Alaska Triangle, and I know that you're real big with vortexes and portals to other dimensions, all right? So in Alaska, what's the theory about that? Then we'll get back to the electromagnetism.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it comes down. Well, it comes down to the electromagnetism. I mean, it starts with the Earth's core. You have that spinning molten ball of iron that produces our electromagnetic shield around the planet. But as it rises through the Earth's mantle and crust, it's interacting with different metals and minerals. Depending on the metal or mineral it interacts with and the quantity of it, it creates different localized electromagnetic fields. Now, in Alaska in the 1960s, the U.S. Department of the Interior did a magnetic survey up there in which they discovered that there were actually negative anomalies up there. There were 5 distinct magnetic characters that they classified, and within these magnetic characters, there were negative anomalies. So they know that there's something unusual going on up there. You know, plus you have all the seismic activity, you know, which is, you know, energy that's released, you know, it's very, very volatile up there, as well as the volcanic activity up there as well. So there's a lot of different energies.
Perfect. And in the Bermuda Triangle, we have a similar anomaly because the issue may not be the ocean, but what's beneath it. And like you pointed out, geologists believe that the Earth's core is molten, and that magnetite, which is a magnetic, I mean, henceforth the name, is a magnetized iron ore, is fluid, and there's times that there may be a surge of magnetite, molten magnetite, which is touching the Earth's crust at the bottom of the ocean. This also ties into the difference between true north and magnetic north. True north is, you know, the direction that we place, and it's north of Greenland. It's basically the top of the Earth on its axis. But magnetic north has been moving, and it's moved 620 miles north-northwest, and it's moving through Canada. Gee, what's Canada connected to? Alaska, okay? Right. So the magnetic field on planet Earth has been moving at a constant rate, 620 miles in a century. So what happens is there's times when magnetic north and true north actually align in the Bermuda Triangle, and it's believed this is when the compasses start going crazy. Because a lot of the other theories are about rogue waves, which make a lot of sense, microbursts from clouds, roll clouds, methane gas emissions. But Columbus is kind of the wild card here, because all those other factors require extremely volatile weather, whereas Columbus didn't report the volatile weather, just that the compasses were going haywire.
Right.
Okay? And think about it. The Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, I mean, heck, the tall sailing ships I was on look like the Nimitz compared to what those guys were on.
Right. Yeah. Different time and era. Victoria, you want to chime in with a few questions here? You've been kind of sitting very quiet over there.
You've asked every single question. But no, I do have, all 24 of them. But I do have a couple of questions. First of all, Columbus was going through during hurricane season. Maybe if he was already going through during inclement weather, it wasn't more inclement. So that's why he didn't report it, perhaps. But if he was going through and they were having bad weather, like before he got to wherever he was going, would that bring up the it's in the Sargasso Sea, what did you say, all the like the seaweed and stuff?
Yeah.
Would that have churned it up, or is it already floating on the top?
The Sargasso Sea is a huge area. It's like a good 100,000 square mile clump of seaweed. And it's funny, growing up on the East Coast, Florida, there's times of the year, and it's good that you brought that up, usually about this time of year, hurricane season, when seaweed starts hitting the beach. And we always hated it when we were kids and we were swimming and surfing because it's creepy. You know, all of a sudden it wraps around your leg, and then there's always stuff swimming in it. And, you know, the ocean's kind of murky in this part of Florida anyway. And then when the seaweed starts rotting on the beach, that's not real pleasant to smell either, you know.
But there's things in it.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff in it. But the Sargasso Sea, though, is an extremely important part of the marine environment. But the thing is, if Columbus had encountered inclement weather, he would have notated it, because that would have been what a responsible captain did. And Columbus, for all his faults, I know it's politically incorrect to celebrate Columbus Day, and he wasn't a nice guy, okay? But you got to think about it. You know, he had the courage and the disposition pretty much of a pirate to take 3 ships, go out on a theory that, well, if we sail west, we'll end up in the Far East, okay? That's like getting in a rocket ship and just shooting out past our solar system. And it did take a lot of guts. And
Sure.
think about the type of people that wanted to be the crews on those ships, all right? So I remember when we were little kids, we learned in 1492, Columbus sailed the
ocean blue.
Yeah. And they turned him into a hero. And now you hear the Native Americans take on it. And, you know, because when he didn't find the riches of East Asia, because he wasn't in Asia, he took slaves back to Spain that were Native Americans. And so that started a very, you know, terrible cycle of things. But if anything, Columbus was very detailed and meticulous in keeping his log and the anomalies on the compass. Plus, the compass was still a relatively new invention. At that particular period of time, they knew about latitude, but they could not yet calculate longitude. And that was a big thing as we went from the era of Columbus into the age of discovery. And that's like, whatever country, and it was pretty much England, Portugal, Spain, and Holland. France came along a little bit later. Whoever could determine longitude, because then you have longitude, latitude, and you could find where you were on Earth and use it as coordinates. And it was the English eventually who figured that out.
Yeah, that was the sextant, right?
Yeah,
the invention of the sextant. Yeah.
Yeah. And that gave a huge technological advantage as to figuring out. I mean, think about that was as big a leap forward as us getting GPS.
Yeah.
You know, before GPS, it's like you're looking at a map going, well, I think I'm somewhere near Akron. I think, you know, now it's like, you know, you click Google Maps, you know, and it tells you where you are. But inclement weather has a lot to do with this. Now, Bruce Gernon. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Victoria.
Well, what if there was like a storm that had gone through, churned up everything? It was like a day or two ahead of him, and he's coming along. Well, now it's all pretty in blue sky. Would the sea still have been that active and trashed, for a better word? You know, I mean, churned up.
I'm glad you asked that, because that is a really good. Damn, she's good.
Well, you know, I've been stuck in hydrilla, which is the same thing. It's the fresh water, you know, it can kill you. That stuff wraps around you and you don't know what's grabbing you. And sometimes it's an alligator where I'm at, you know, but
right. Well,
you know, you just don't know.
No, it's true. Well, yes, storms can play a part to this. And one of the theories is rogue waves. Now, rogue waves were considered theoretical, but now they've been proven, they've been observed, and they're nasty. And there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle that have to fall into place for rogue waves. It involves a couple different opposing forces. First, there has to be ocean swells, but not just an ocean swell, but several that start piggybacking on top of each other and creating a huge momentum. Then that ocean swell has to hit, and here's where Victoria's question hits the bullseye, has to hit storm waves. All right, big waves caused by storms. Now, this involves frequency and amplitude. Frequency, think of a basketball. You're dribbling a basketball. How many times you dribble a basketball in a minute is its frequency. Amplitude is how high the ball bounces. In rogue wave conditions, you have storm surges piggybacking on top of each other and reinforcing each other, and then storm waves. So the frequency of the waves decreases and it creates a surge in amplitude, because when these two massive forces hit each other, they immediately cause a wall of water, which can be over 10 stories high. We're talking over 100 feet, and it can form in an instant. It's like boom, like that. And if that occurred, it wouldn't give a ship or an airplane flying low a chance to radio in, and that would be that. And these have been cited, and they have been documented. Okay, so
isn't that what the Poseidon? I'm sorry, isn't that what the Poseidon adventure was? With just a rogue wave, and it just knocked it over.
Yeah, well, the Poseidon adventure, it was a tsunami, but it's the same principle, and that's a good analogy. Yeah, because see, on that they knew it was coming. Whereas with a rogue wave, all of a sudden you're in a ship, and next thing you know, there's a 100-foot wall. That's a 10-story building of water, and that's and then when it hits you, that's it. Now, the problem with that theory is, how would it affect something like Flight 19? That's thousands of feet above. Right. A new theory is microbursts. Microbursts are intense concentrations of air emitted from clouds, and they can be over 100 miles per hour, and they can definitely devastate ships. They can definitely devastate aircraft, and for a brief period of time can affect compasses. That's one theory. Another theory is that methane gas is being emitted from the ocean bottom, and the methane gas all of a sudden depletes the water around a ship to where it would just sink and then be overwhelmed. It can also affect aircraft engines, because as it rises in the atmosphere. The snafu there is it won't affect compasses. So for me, and the reason I wanted to do this show with Mike is because the commonality between the Alaska Triangle and the Bermuda Triangle keeps pointing towards electromagnetic anomalies. And here's my theory. Why haven't they found these million-pound ships? Why haven't they found an entire squadron of fighter planes? Well, one theory, an initial theory, was that the Gulf Stream currents pulled them away. Seriously? But what about now? What about the intense electromagnetism that occurs when you get a surge of molten magnetite beneath the Earth's crust? So you have the biggest magnet in the world pulling these things miles and miles from where they sank, or possibly even underneath the Earth's surface. And that
was my next question.
Sorry. No trace has been found. Go ahead, Victoria.
Okay. Are there trenches? First thing, are there trenches? Is there volcanic activity? Could this possibly have fallen to the ground? There have been some sort of tectonic or volcanic or woo-woo activity, and it got covered up again.
There is volcanic activity in the Caribbean. I was on the island of Montserrat. And the island of Montserrat, I remember I was walking around in a volcanic crater there, and it was all like bloop, bloop, bloop. It was cool. It's like, all this sulfur boiling around. And then I said, we're in a volcano. And said, has it ever erupted? And all the locals, oh, man, this hasn't erupted for, Well, about a year after I was there, the island of Montserrat exploded because the volcano did erupt. So there is volcanic activity, and Montserrat is right there in the Bermuda Triangle. So you definitely have that. It's funny when people say, oh, well, this area doesn't have volcanoes. we're on planet Earth. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's molten there's molten lava everywhere throughout the planet that can just find a crack, and there you go.
And there you go.
Yeah.
Exactly. A couple years ago, I was in Nat Geo, the helicopter Nat Geo uses, and we were flying over Kilauea on the Big Island, Hawaii, when it was in full eruption mode. Now, I've seen some stuff, both spiritual and physical, that was in the top like 3, because the lava was shooting hundreds of feet above into the air. And the pilot, and he was really good. And I said, "Can we fly over?" And he goes, "Only if we want to get incinerated." All right. And but when we were up there, you could see a crack along the entire surface of the Big Island, and the steam coming out. And then there was the lava flows that just decimated. I mean, it's huge sections of the Big Island, but was also forming land. And it was really fascinating to be able to witness the birth of land. And and we were talking about this because we were filming something, and the helicopter's bouncing all over the place, and I'm trying to like hold my breakfast down, and they got all these big bruiser Hawaiians and stuff. They're filming everything, and I thought, man, there's no way I can toss my cookies in front of these guys, and and I have to be clever and smile and say intelligent things. And I'm like, and the pilot's like, we got enough fuel for another 90 minutes here, and I'm like, yay, but it was so funny because when we finally got back to Hilo Airport, I got off the helicopter, and all these big, tough Air Force guys like, man, I thought I was going to hurl. I have never felt so good about my manly manhood as I did at that particular moment. But the thing is, we were witnessing how the Earth's continents were formed hundreds of millions of years ago by the massive flow of lava into the ocean, and you could see it. And the water in the whole area was boiling, but it was the birth of Earth. And it was really a really fascinating phenomenon. So like Mike said, we're on planet Earth. Below the crust, there's molten there's molten metal, there's lava, magma, they're everywhere. And I think what makes the Bermuda Triangle such an anomaly, I believe that the Earth's crust at the bottom of the ocean there may be a bit thinner than it is in other places, so that when the liquid magnetite, the molten magnetite, has a surge, that's what causes the electromagnetic anomalies. And I would venture to say that a similar phenomenon may be occurring in Alaska, which is also extremely geologically active.
It is. And it was in 2020, they discovered, and it makes sense. The Aleutian Islands are volcanic. And like Mount Cleveland is the most volcanic one there in the Aleutian Islands, but there's other volcanoes as well. But they discovered it's actually part of an ancient caldera. That when they were able to examine under the ocean, they're seeing the basin there, like, oh yeah, this was once a huge super volcano here. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But aren't there sorry.
No, go ahead.
Isn't there a secret military base in the Aleutian Islands filled with aliens?
I could tell you that, but then I'd have to just kill everybody watching the show right now. So, I don't want to go house to house and do that.
Well, I know Mike and I have had this discussion before about ley lines, L-E-Y, ley lines. Yeah. And ley lines are, they're lines along the Earth's surface that emit electromagnetic energy. And when you get an intersection of ley lines, that's where you get a vortex. And a vortex is like, all right, a whirlpool. When you pull when you empty the drain in a sink or a bathtub, you see a whirlpool. A tornado or a hurricane is a whirlpool, but in the sky. And the theory with ley lines, which Mike just demonstrated locations of them throughout the world, is it is an electromagnetic whirlpool. Sedona has, I believe, five vortices, and they tend to be positive. Not all of them are positive. I've been to a number of paranormal investigation places where I feel that it's a negative energy vortex. I believe the Bermuda Triangle is a massive electromagnetic vortex. And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but a number of archaeological sites throughout the world also appear to be vortexes, such as the Giza Plateau.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, there are some big sites like that, Giza Plateau, but then you other ones along the world, like you look at something like this. And what's funny to me is a lot of when you hunt down maps of ley lines, they're all a little different to some degree, but they all have some commonalities too. Like with this one, Bermuda Triangle's there, American Southwest is within it. You can see one kind of comes along the Giza Plateau there. But then you have, there are ley lines that are, really they're telluric currents. We're talking about the electromagnetic energy that's running through the line. And the ley is the geographic lining up of all the ancient sites of power. You go through something like England, the Michael and Mary line, where, you find all of these different sites that either went churches, churches would take over ancient sites where the Druids and others were at, and would build their temple or church on top. And you find all these churches that were dedicated to the Archangel Michael or Mary, like Mother Mary, at those that just all line up like that. But then also, Stonehenge is thrown in the mix, and some of these other stone circles and things like this. And it's like, oh, they're all lining up, and that's because the ancients knew the electromagnetism was there to tap into.
Well,
speaking of ley lines, sorry.
Go ahead, Victoria.
I read it this week that there are so many of us going, there are shifts coming. I mean, I'm feeling the shift. I feel the shift. I'm sure y'all feel the shift. There are actual shifts happening. And from what I read, it's that there were so many earth changes, like with the Schumann resonance and all the earthquakes and storms and everything you can think of, that's actually physically changing the shape of the earth, the new thing. And Yellowstone is opening up, and there's a new fault line in the United States that's opening up. It's shifting the ley lines or the telluric currents, and the energy is shifting. And so that's what we're all picking up on, is the actual physical shifting of the energy. So the earth is actually being rebuilt. Okay, that's it.
Oh, that is really fascinating. And it also shows, like what Mike said, this is planet Earth. There's magma. There's geologic activity everywhere.
Tectonic plates, things are moving. Yeah,
it's not.
That's what we're picking up on.
Environment. Yeah, the world is not static. People say, "Oh, the climate's not changing." Look, I've lived on the Barrier Island in East Coast Florida most of my life. And when I was a little kid, we would get a hurricane, maybe a Category 1, every 5 or 6 years. Now we're getting 6 or 7 Category 4s and sometimes 5s a year. I mean, last year I got hit twice by hurricanes. That was unheard of. And the thing is, we know that Earth's climate has changed. I mean, once again, the Giza Plateau, at one time that was a tropical rainforest.
Yeah.
And that was about
it's always been changing. Since the planet formed, it's been changing. Yeah.
Right. I mean, even the moon, apparently it was recorded an asteroid hit on the moon the other day. So even the moon, which looks like a big, solid chunk of dead rock floating through space, changes when it gets hit by meteors or asteroids. But the thing is, the Bermuda Triangle, the Alaska Triangle, these vortexes, I don't believe this is some airy-fairy, new age, fanciful nonsense. I believe that there is a real explanation for all of this. I believe that weather patterns are part of it, and weather patterns are also influenced by the Earth's electromagnetic and gravitational fields. And so I think it all comes back to electromagnetic energy. Now, like you brought up, Victoria, I just wrote an article actually for Best Holistic Life about a spirit of a friend of mine. She passed. Her name was Gloria, and she was one of the coolest people you'd ever meet. So sorry, but thanks.
I'm sorry about your friend.
Yeah, thank you. But the thing is, can these electromagnetic anomalies create a Stargate. Now, Mike, you're kind of the expert on Stargates.
Yeah.
What's your take?
Well, yeah. I mean, when it comes to Stargates, it's essentially an intelligent being's ability to harness, the power of a portal to use it at their will. Well, okay, what's a portal? And that's basically, this vortex energy that is creating these portals it could be to any number of different places. It could be to another place on Earth. It could be to another point in time, some other dimension, another place in the cosmos. And electromagnetism plays a huge part of it. It's exactly, I mean, Mark, you use the exact same words that I do when I talk about, okay, what's a vortex? And I use the analogy of, a whirlpool is a water vortex, a tornado is a wind vortex. And then when it comes to energy, we also have these vortices. And this is something that, even the ancients were aware of. When you look at the, symbolism of a spiral, that's a two-dimensional representation of it. And our ancient peoples were talking about this all the time, and they were actively using portals. So yeah, this electromagnetic energy is what helps power that.
Yeah, I believe that it does. Now,
I know you're going to talk about Bruce Gernon there for a minute.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really fascinating story, because we actually even used that story. We brought Bruce on the show for the Alaska Triangle and used his story to talk about a lot of the missing airplanes there in Alaska, and if the electromagnetism there, it was causing these portals in the air for the planes to slip through.
Yes. One of the theories related to for Bruce Gernon, for the listeners who may not be familiar, in 1970, he was a pilot, and he flew routinely from the Bahamas to Miami, and he was returning from Andros Island. Andros Island in and of itself is a pretty bizarre place, because right off of Andros Island, there's these huge, deep blue holes in the ocean.
Interesting.
Really, really deep. And, there's been rumors of sea monsters and strange things there. And it's certainly, the Bahamians don't want to dispel the rumors, because it's good for business, but hey, you never know. But he was flying back from Andros Island, and normally it takes about 3 hours. Mm-hmm. And suddenly he saw what looked like a tunnel, and his plane got sucked into this tunnel. And when he came out of it, he had traveled 100 miles in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And the question is, did he hit some type of vortex time anomaly? Now, the skeptics are saying that what he went into was a roll cloud, an ROLL cloud. And roll clouds form on the edge of storms, and they look like a rolling pin. Basically, they form a tube, and he went into a roll cloud and then got hit with an incredibly strong tailwind, which basically just shot his plane like a bullet through this area. Now, Bruce doesn't necessarily subscribe to that. It's an interesting theory.
I think he would have felt that if he got propelled that fast.
Yeah, it's like if you're driving.
How many G's is that?
I mean, it's in a small plane.
Yeah.
And it would be like you're riding your bicycle, and all of a sudden it goes 80 miles an hour. You're going to feel that, all right?
Yeah.
You're going from like 10 miles an hour to 80 miles an hour. You're going to feel it. One of the anomalies, though, is that the clocks in the plane match those on the runway. Right. So skeptics say it's doubtful that this was time travel, but high speed. But why would a clock record a warp in time? Okay, a clock's basically a timer, and it's doing what it does, So is it possible? Because also,
I've used it in my time travel work, that story. Absolutely.
Yeah. And also, like you said, Mike, you're going to feel that. And the type of plane that he's in isn't designed to go 600 miles an hour.
Right.
Okay. It would most likely break up. So I think it's really fascinating what happened with Bruce. And once again, where did it happen? Over the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, that's something that I've proposed with Okay, with Bruce's story, and I believe that whatever this vortex was that formed up in front of him, it basically propelled him forward in time. I use it as a time travel story. And so when we were talking about the Alaska Triangle, the missing Douglas Skymaster back in 1950, and we could use this for really any of the stories of missing airplanes up there. We use this particular one, that one of the ideas is that it did pass through some sort of portal and disappeared. Now, we didn't take it on the show as far as like okay, where did it go? We kind of lightly said maybe another dimension or something like that. But I propose, it could have gone to another point in time, and instead of going forward in time, maybe it went backward in time, and throw out an arbitrary number like 500 years. Okay, if it went backward in time 500 years, what would it look like to the indigenous people of the area at the time? Because they would have no idea of what an airplane is. This would be some loud, huge, thunderous bird in the air to them. So is this where some of the Thunderbird legends come from, or airplanes, modern airplanes that have gone through one of these and ended up back in time?
Wow. And people can say, well, that sounds ridiculous. And it's like, yeah, but 100 years ago, a cell phone was science fiction.
Yeah.
Okay.
100 years ago, they were laughing Nikola Tesla out of the room for talking about drones, artificial intelligence, and all the knowledge of the world being on a small device you would have in your pocket. And now we have cell phones. So yeah.
Right. Well, in 100, and let's say trains came on the scene, I guess around 1830 or so. There was a fear that everybody on the train was going to be killed because it was going to move so fast it would suck the oxygen out of the train and form a vacuum.
Oh my God.
Well, I mean, those were people's misconceptions of things at the time. Try explaining a microwave oven to somebody in the year 1925, 100 years ago. So just because people don't understand things, or just because we do not yet have the technological explanation, doesn't mean that it isn't real. There's been too many anomalies within the Bermuda Triangle. In more recent years, with the exception of Bruce Gernon, there haven't been as many. Now, the question then is why? Is it because the ships are bigger, built stronger? Is it because the airplanes are now flying 5 miles up? I mean, but there's a lot of small craft flying back and forth to the Bahamas and throughout the Bermuda Triangle. So the question then is, why hasn't something happened more recently? On the other hand, that doesn't mean that it won't.
Right. Yeah, because even like in Alaska, things still go missing. Go ahead, Victoria.
Okay. About 20 minutes ago, when y'all were talking about the roll cloud, just kidding. Okay.
Wasn't that long ago.
I know. Time doesn't exist, Mike.
Time doesn't exist.
Okay. Let's say you're in the storm. There's a roll cloud. Okay, so you're creating all this energy, right? You have the magnetism or the no magnetism coming up from the Bermuda Triangle. So there's I don't want to say vortex, but there's a swirling energy. What if those two combined and created, something like that? Not something where he was being propelled through the roll cloud. What if he was like in a tractor beam and he was being pulled through? Because that's one of the theories from a friend of mine who's a physicist, is that starships do not propel themselves. They suck in the atmosphere, the ether or whatever, and then they are propelled. So no, they're not propelled, they're pulling themselves through. Does that make sense?
Were you about to say propelled?
Propelled.
Well,
I'm trying not to be so sudden.
The explanation that I can give is, all right, here's where Andros Island is, here's where Miami is. And normally it's going to take 3 hours to fly from one point to another. There is a concept in astrophysics known as the Alcubierre that if a warp field of sufficient energy surrounds a vessel, it doesn't, it warps space-time. So in other words, if we took a spaceship from Earth to go to Alpha Centauri, our closest star, it would have to go at the speed of light, 186,282 miles per second. For our metric friends, 299,792.4 kilometers per second for an entire 4 years to traverse that, which is why it's believed that UFOs, extraterrestrials, are not using really fast engines, but rather forming a warp bubble so that they cause a fold in space-time so that you jump from one coordinate to the other simultaneously. Now, and every credible physicist is saying that this is possible, but we simply don't have the technology yet to generate that enough form of energy. Well, what if, for the sake of discussion here, that whatever this electromagnetic anomaly is, either here in the Bermuda Triangle or in the Alaska Triangle, is doing something similar to that? And maybe that's what happened to Bruce Gernon, and maybe he was one of the lucky ones that it was just a little bit of that. So he jumps from Andros Island to Miami like in minutes. And what about if Flight 19 and the 3 Cyclops class ships and all the other ships that disappeared, what if they hit that anomaly? Did they go somewhere in time? Did they go to another dimension? Right. Or did they just get sucked into the Earth's crust? At this point, we don't know, but it sure does make for great conversation.
It
right.
does.
So if it was like a tractor beam, wouldn't it have some sort of energy barrier around it? Because Mike was saying there's no way that could stand going 8 million miles an hour or whatever. So it's like in its little protective cocoon that was being pulled. It is because of all the electromagnetic woo-woo that was going on at the moment.
Entirely possible.
So we have some questions here out of the chat. We're getting low on time, so I do want to get to a few of these from our viewers this evening. So Pine Dora Farms, what's the difference between a positive vortex and a negative one?
Well, there's positive electrical charges and negative electrical charges. Now, as a psychic medium, I've investigated a number of locations, sacred sites, mystical sites, and some have a very positive vibe. You feel uplifted. Like when I was at Stonehenge, I just felt so uplifted. Then I've been other places where, I mean, to paraphrase Yoda, strong with the dark side of the force, this place is, you know, you get
pretty good at that.
You get this feeling of negativity, depression, darkness, anger. I just did an episode on one of Zach Bagan's shows called Destinations of the Damned, and it was at an abandoned sanatorium in Indiana, and all I felt was negative energy. And so a negative vortex, if you get somebody who's mentally unstable, it's going to influence their behavior. And of course, they brought me in because being a psychic medium and a lawyer, there was a horrific cold case there. And to me, I could see how that energetic environment could motivate somebody to do some pretty horrible things. Yeah. And that's why there's other areas like Lourdes in France and Fatima and Medjugorje and places in India and in Egypt, at the various the Temple of a Million Years, Elephantine Island, the Ramesseum, where people feel positive because they had people like me back then, mediums who are sensitive to this form of energy. Mm-hmm. I mean, Stonehenge's location, it was not random. Neither was Giza Plateau. Right. Yeah. Neither was any of those things. They had somebody that was sensitive to the natural energy there in the vortex. So I hope that helps answer that question.
Okay, great. Jose Sanchez asks, could there also have been random dimensional time gates that opened and swallowed a lot of these air and sea craft?
Jose, I think your question is a very good one, and I think that is in line with what Victoria and Mike or I were talking about, is that these electromagnetic vortices may have triggered these interdimensional portals. Because we know from quantum physics, everything's made of molecules, which in turn are made of atoms, which in turn are composed of electrons, protons, and neutrons, which in turn, on the subatomic level, everything's made of a quantum, which is electromagnetic energy. Now, for our physics friends, yes, an electron is technically a quantum because it's 1/1800th the size of a proton. We get that. And there's hadrons and Higgs boson particles, but the smallest particle is the quantum. And so if everything is a quantum, and that means you, me, the chairs we're sitting in, the microphones we're speaking in, the radio waves this program is being broadcast on, the light of the sun, the rings of Saturn, and beyond are all at the most basic level electromagnetic energy. If there is a great disruption in that electromagnetic energy that can possibly tie into other forms of electromagnetic energy, it may in effect trigger the Alcubierre, which will catapult you from one dimension to the next.
Fantastic. I think this one
I was
was
just
more
saying that the other day.
Yeah. You're telling Toby that?
Yeah, we were just chatting over some cat food.
So I think this one is more for me. The good stuff with it, which I think is also Lisa. What role does the Black Pyramid underground in Alaska have in the triangle and missing crafts? So it's interesting about the Black Pyramid because it's supposed to be under a mountain alley there in Alaska, and it's not readily accessible. I mean, it's more it's hard to prove that it actually exists, aside from the fact that seismic results from the early 1990s when China was doing nuclear testing, and we were measuring the seismic output of that. We discovered that there was an unusual pyramidal shape there under Alaska. So there have been a lot of stories, anecdotal stories that have come out of there. So we don't really know for sure, other than there's supposed to be this Black Pyramid. There's supposed to be some sort of not only military, but extraterrestrial involvement, or maybe even ultra-terrestrial, something interdimensional. And it may have been used kind of like what Christopher Dunn's idea about the Great Pyramid on the Giza Plateau, that may have also been used for some sort of power plant there in Alaska. So when it comes to the missing aircraft up there, it's really hard to know what effect, if any, that may have on it up there. Now, if we're talking about a highly magnetic area, and if it is, built like the Great Pyramid, well, even modern science, like 7-8 years ago, showed that the Great Pyramid is harnessing energy from the Earth and storing it within the chambers of the pyramid. So, yeah, it could have some sort of effect. And then China, I think it was a year or two ago, had with some sort of radar testing detected plasma bubbles that form up over the Great Pyramid. So if something like that is going on in Alaska as well, I mean, theoretically, it could affect it somehow.
What kind of stone is the pyramid made out of, in general, more or less?
The Great Pyramid is primarily limestone, and then some of the chambers inside are made of granite. Yeah, and there was 2 different types of limestone, but most of the white limestone casing blocks are gone. So,
yeah, that every time I hear about that, I just start grinding my teeth because part of, I think it's the Pyramid of Khafre, there's still some of the limestone there. And at one time, the pyramids, according to what I've researched, they were coated in a beautiful white limestone, and the tops of them were gold plated. Supposedly,
what's interesting about that, Mark, is that's okay. It's interesting the way this was all set up. So that's true. The Great Pyramid, the second pyramid, the Khafre, was half the top of it was the white limestone. The bottom half was granite, and then the Pyramid of Menkaure, the third one, the smaller one, was all granite. So it's kind of interesting the way that was set up across the Giza Plateau. All limestone on one side, all granite on the other, and the middle was half and half.
Yeah, and was it budget cuts, or was there a technological reason for it? Because my understanding too is that at one time the obelisks were plated in electrum.
Right. Yeah.
They were supposed to symbolize the rays of the sun. And it's interesting because Western archaeologists come, oh, they symbolize the rays of the sun. Well, maybe they did, or maybe they had yet another purpose that we don't understand yet. We don't have the time to go into another theory I have, but
well, save it for the after show.
What if one was for the sun and one was for the moon? That way you keep the duality, because the moon is just a reflection of the sun. Just saying.
Oh, that's a possibility.
It's a possibility.
So
next time you go,
and on that note,
limestone.
That's a really good thought.
It is. It is a really, really good thought. So I like that. The sun and the moon. That is good, Victoria. So, but we do have to wrap up this on the public side. So want to thank all those, especially those listening to the podcast version of this later. Join us every Wednesday night, 8:00 p.m. Eastern Time, connecteduniverseportal.com. This is Edge of the Rabbit Hole. Of course, you can get the bulk of the show there on the YouTube channel. And then for members of the Connected Universe portal, and then the time travelers of the Patreon, you guys get the after show. So come join us there in just a moment. Till next time, time really exists.